Right. Good morning. All right. Welcome to the morning show with our method on this lovely Monday morning, bright as outside. So, go with me. Uh, Doing this every Monday morning. Something comes up. Get the week started for everybody and for me to get me up on Monday so that I have more time during the day on Monday to get everything ready for streaming week. And just as a place, my discussions. So I've been talking a lot about my getting bored thing. I did a little bit of it for YouTube, where I did a board game review, did the voiceover, edited all that stuff. That was a lot of work, and I'm still thinking about that as far as board game content goes. But it's really difficult to look at my board games here, find a board game, get it all put together, do like a quick rundown of the rules, do a review on it, and then edit and do all the voiceover, and then realize that you can't actually get that board game. So I don't want to be doing that. I don't want to show all this stuff off to people about these board games, and then they go to like Amazon or they go to a local board game store and they can't even get it. Some of my board games were like one-time Kickstarters. They're out of print now, or for whatever reason they just don't want to make them anymore. Yeah, so that became difficult to figure out board games that I have that were easy to buy or even available to buy that I could do a review on and show. To be like, hey, this is, if you're looking about buying this game, here's how it plays, here's my opinions on it, stuff like that. So that's where we were at with that. I'm still gonna try to do some reviews and board game content and stuff like that. But I wanted to make this my morning show where we mourn the loss of weekend for everybody that's in that situation where start of their work week. Yeah, and people that look forward to the weekend don't like it when it ends. So we're mourning the loss of the weekend, but we're getting ready for the week. And what better way to get ready for the week than to talk about stuff? Today, my biggest thing that I want to talk about today is going to be board game related stuff. Talking about, so we're going to do a good segment of getting bored. Segment, the YouTube content, stuff like that I eventually wanted to do for board games, things like that. So, getting bored. So what we're going to talk about today will be about the difference between conceptual card game and rules card games. So, and the difficulty and the difference between the difficulty of each. And you might not know exactly what that means right now, but hopefully by the end of this morning show, you will have a good understanding of how I look at board games when I'm thinking about how difficult it is and whether or not I should bring it over to somebody's house or introduce somebody to that board game. That will be our discussion today once we get into it. I do want to talk about, though, this is the first morning show. As the first, I do want to explain a little bit of, what else I want to do the morning show. So besides talking about board games, I want to talk about other stuff in general. I want to try to keep this positive as it goes for a morning show, because like I said, I want to get people pumped people thinking, and get people just starting their week off. So I don't know if I'm going to some things I want to bring in my channel. There's things I want to foster in a community that I want to grow, and this is one step of it. Morning show and making content for like board games and stuff like that. But I also want to talk about like and bring into foster into mental health and about it's and struggle with ADHD, things like that, things that I have personal experience with. So I might choose to do that with this morning show, or I might bring another like just talking show into it, just chatting type of situation into fold. Maybe something that goes like later in the week, like on a Wednesday or Thursday, maybe something at night, as just a place to talk about things like that, hang out and just chill. Maybe I'll play like a video game like Animal Crossing or something like that, something relaxing, so we can just chat and us, in a safe place where people can feel free to talk about their struggle, if they have issues with ADHD and they're struggling, and or if they have and I want to incorporate the I will not drink with you today stuff. It's really popular. I don't know if it's popular, but it is a hashtag that a lot of people use that suffer from types of addiction or are trying to support people who do suffer from addictions, and just to bring them, say, hey, I don't have this problem, but I'll stand by you and I won't drink today with you, things like that. And it's a really good hashtag. It's letters offhand. It is hashtag IWNWYT. I will not drink. Great hashtag. It's you can go around, you can look for that hashtag, you can find stuff like that at Reddit, and it's been a lot of great people that use that hashtag or like do that thing. So stuff like that I want as like the next phase goes, building up a community here around my channel. I don't want it just to be playing games. I mean, that's going to be a lot of it. I like doing that, and for me that helps out a lot of stuff. It keeps my mind busy, it gets me doing things, and it's a lot of fun, especially when you're hanging out with people, playing games together, talking, especially with some of the company I've found so far, some of the people I've met streaming. A lot of fun. So that will be, I'm not sure if that will be the morning show, just because of how deep that can get, and I want the morning show to be more upbeat, but that is a phase to reach something like that. And so that being said, the first episode of the morning show is we're going to go right into the board game portion of it. Started a little late today anyway, so we're going to get into board game discussion of it, and this is something that I've been wanting to make about or make content about, and something I've been thinking about a lot. I even got coffee. Like, drank a lot of coffee lately. I haven't drank a lot of it. Got it. I got some coffee for them. So let's talk about board game difficulty. And so, like I mentioned before, one of the biggest differences when I look at board games, in my head, is conceptually hard and really hard. They're two ends of it. They're like at the far ends of the spectrum, and there are tons of games that are in between. There's tons of games that don't really fall into one or the other situation, but some of my games definitely fall into one category like this, and or one of those two categories, or And I look at those I'm talking about, or looking at bringing board games over to a board game night, or if people come over to hang out with me and my wife and we're going to play board games, and I come over here to my shelf, I immediately I think about the person that we're about to introduce board games to, and what is a good board game to do. So the difference between a game that is conceptually hard and a game that is hard is basically, it comes down to like a little bit of left side brain, right side brain. So a game that is conceptually hard will a lot of times be easy for somebody who is more right side brain, more creative brain thinking, because they can envision the situation better. A game that is more rules heavy, generally speaking, is a game that will be a little bit easier for somebody who's left side brain, more logical thinking, more analytical thinking process, because it basically means like the rules are laid out. Here's what happens when this, do this. Here's your turn, one step at a time. Here's everything you can do and everything you do. And at the end of the turn, you clean up and then you go back through it. A conceptual game is something more fluid. It says here is objective, here's your goal, and here's some tools. Now get there. So that's like a real basic way of looking at it, but that's kind of like baseline of this is a conceptually hard game and this is a rules hard game. We do have some examples and we're going to go over some of them. See, I put some of them right here behind me, and I just grabbed a couple, but I'll talk about more of them. I had lots of options, and it was about like what I could fit on this shelf here next to me. Biggest game that anybody in the tabletop world that's played tabletop games of some kind, and I don't mean the tabletop when I talk about board. Obviously, you got Monopoly, you got Risk, you got Life. I don't really consider those. I mean, they're board games, but I don't. That's like they're not in my rotation. I don't have any of them. I have Ego. Ego is one of those ones. The Bradley games that you find at your local store, like like a Target or something like that, have been around forever. They're just, those games are just such a small level of board games that they're mostly made for kids. So those, I don't even factor those into when I talk about like tabletop and board games. So if you are real into board games and tabletops, this game that you will have heard people talk about, or a variation of this have talked about. One of the two that started off, Are You a Werewolf? Is real old edition, like basic edition, like it came out. I don't even know how long. I've owned this for five or 6 years, but I don't know when it actually came out. But this one's not as in rotation as much as in rotation in like circles, as far as like perception and social deduction games go for, because there's been so many improvements on this game by now. Ultimate One Night Werewolf. There's all different kinds of games that are based around concept of the werewolf system. Now, this game that is in conceptual difficulty spectrum. Game itself, gotta pop this in a little bit. You could tell just by how small it is. So you open this thing up. It is just cards. all that's in. So just a lot of cards like that. All that's in the box. Cards don't even say that much. Basically say a roll. That's it. No rule printed on the cards. There's no like board you have to set up. You're literally given a card and then you're told to remember what it says, keep it in your pocket. You have to do to hide that card. Rule book itself is a little pamphlet. That's all it is. Sided little pamphlet. Some of the pages don't even have any rules on them. They just have flavor text. That is all that is in this game. You got this all you're given. And that is why this game is real high up there as far as I consider conceptual difficult. Because when you sit down with your friend, where I haven't played this in a while, nearly 7 people. 7 people. Go up to 12 people. So obviously in the last year, it's a little difficult to get 12 people to hang out together in a room. Safe, and I wouldn't recommend it. Still wouldn't really recommend it right now, even right now. If you're vaccinated, maybe get like 8 to 9 of them together. That's considered a small gathering. But it's still not a great idea. So, I mean, there's obviously online ways to play it, tabletop simulator, things like that. But so, when you sit down to play this game, there is not a set path. There's not a set turn. There is a loose turn order of things you have to do. There's no time limits. The only goal and the only objective in the game is that villagers' goal is to get rid of the werewolves. The werewolf's goal is to kill all the villagers. That is the only goal. So you sit in a little group hanging out on your couch or in a ring of chairs. If you're in a convention, they'll do a ring of chairs in like a in a setting, and you'll have one moderator. That guy runs the game. Everybody else just gets a card. That card tells you if you're a villager or if you're a werewolf. Moderator will go through a thing where he tells everybody to close their eyes. At night, one of the werewolves wake up, they kill somebody. They close their eyes, everybody goes back to sleep. There is the seer. They wake up, they point at somebody. Moderator tells them with a thumbs up or thumbs down if that's a werewolf or not. They go back to sleep by closing their eyes. Everybody wakes up, and then you talk. That's literally the entire game. And then you talk for as long as you feel like talking, or until the moderator decides that it's over. Then you have to make a decision if you're exiling, killing, whatever you want to call it, from the village. There is no direction as far as that goes. So wake up, you just start talking to the people around you. Who knows what you're talking about, or anything like that. It is very difficult for a lot of people, even for me. Like, I've played it a few times, so I'm a little bit better at it, but it's very difficult for a lot of people to process that. Now just talk to people, and to get from just talking to people to like try to ask stuff to make people trip up is a very weird, A to B situation. It's not easy to get there. You just don't know what to talk about. You talk about your day in real life, you can do that. But at some point in time, you have to accuse somebody. And you have to, based on just what people are talking about, or based on like their body movements or anything like that, try to figure out what they are. And it usually comes down to just blind accusations the first day, and then you get rid of somebody from the village, everybody goes to sleep, and then the second day starts. And generally speaking, depending on how good the werewolves are, they will kill somebody. They'll either increase the suspicion on themselves if they're not good, or they'll throw suspicion on somebody. So if, like, player A accuses player B, player C is the werewolf. They'll kill player A. Then everybody in the circle will be like, well, maybe it's player B because player A was throwing heat on them. Things like that. That's the whole game. There's barely any structure to the game. Conception, like from a rule standpoint, it's here's your card, don't be a villager. So that's why it game like that. Somebody who's right side brain gonna have a little bit more, generally speaking, if they're a creative thinking stuff like that, they'll generally have an easier time getting into that than somebody who's more logical, left side everything, because they're going to be structure. They're going to be looking for, okay, we woke up. What actions do I have on my turn? How many actions can I do? Or what's my, each goal of my actions? Like, how do I, stuff like that. That's what, generally speaking, that's what they're going to be looking for. And that's just not present in Werewolf. It's just a story game. So that honestly is probably the most conceptually hard game in my collection, Werewolf, just because it's just so free for all. That's the basic idea of like conceptual difficulty. Before I go into the middle grounds, things like that. So I'm gonna go straight into a game that I found in my collection. Games that I immediately thought of when thinking of rules difficulty. Just as a little refresher, what we got again, literally all the rules are Werewolf. This pamphlet. Then we're gonna go for guy right here, this big box right here. Game, Crossmaster Quest. Rulebook for it. Rulebook is big as my head. Rulebook, 30 pages. Diagrams, rules, everything. Marketplace, crafting, monster, AI rules, that monster powers that they can use. Discussions about area of effect on it. Different types of once per turn you game you need line of sight. If you don't need line of sight, you have different ways to craft, pick up, heal injuries. It goes through setting up the game. Have 3 pages. Got just pages of game that's called the basics to understand the game, stuff like that. Game is this long, and back of it, like here's some things that are broken down per turn. Like here's all the different actions you have on your turn, the player turn, types of damage, how to calculate that, how to calculate line of sight. They added some quick things on the back of the book. By the time you get through all this book, read all this stuff, like you're probably gonna have forgotten most. But here's a little Crossmaster Quest game. Very much on the other side of the spectrum. It rules the actual game itself. Not hard to understand. Have your character go out, you fight monsters, you gain experience, and you have a clear objective. It's kill this many monsters and then kill this monster boss, then the game is over. You're working together with your friends in relatively co-op, and you all are working towards the same objective. So like you need new stuff, you go to the marketplace, you buy it. There's rules set out for the marketplace. Say, hey, you have to stand on this spot and do the thing to the marketplace. No real level of creative conceptual difficulty, it is laid out in the rule by rule. You attack this monster and it has this much armor. Unless you're using a damage that ignores that armor, here's your damage output. Everything is laid out. But that's where somebody with a left side logical brain is going, like, yeah, this all makes sense. Here's everything I can do on my turn. Here's the result if I do them. Here's our objective. Here's how we get to our objective. Step by step, kill these guys, collect these feathers, do this or do that, and you game. So that, but there is, pages and pages of rules. So that's where I consider like rules difficult. The concept of winning the game is easy. Getting to there is hard because you have such a strict kind of rules. So Crossmaster Quest, is you're going to set this giant game up. You're going to lay all this stuff out. You got somebody who, or right side brain creative thinking, they're going to see all this stuff and they're just like, this is a lot. There's too many things for me to remember on my turn. I have to do this. I have to refresh that. I have to, pay attention to the different things, it's one after another. So somebody who is creative right side thinking is going to have a bit more difficulty with 30 pages long that lays out your turn like step by step than somebody who's or left side logical brain. So that's why it's all in the book there. Like it tells you exactly how to game step by step. But there's 500 steps on your turn, so it's really hard for some people to remember each of those steps and forget to do certain parts and things like that. So that is why Crossmaster Quest rules difficult game. Werewolf, where you just get a card, and it says, "Hey, you're a villager. Go be a villager." That's a conceptually difficult game because there are no set of rules. It says, "Hey, go to sleep at night, wake up, and you talk to people." Like you just physically have to talk to people. So conceptually, win that game is a lot difficult because you know what you have to do, but there's no steps to get there. We have to figure out who the werewolves are. Okay, how do we do that? Let's just talk about our weekend. That's not going to get you anywhere. Sorry. So there's no like, hey, ask these questions and you're going to get these answers, and then you're going to figure out who the werewolf is. That's not how it goes because a bunch of people sitting around talking. That game is the farthest game on conceptual difficulty I have. Crossmaster Quest is probably not the hardest rules difficult game that I have. I have a lot more. It's the one that I know I've personally had the most difficult with when I was learning that one. So go into consider somewhat in the middle. This game, right? I actually just got a new version of that game that I had to play. This called Coup. This game, rulebook itself, kind of small, got only a few pages. So, wise, it's not rules heavy, but it has the rules laid out, and it also is conceptually difficult. It's more conceptual difficult than, but it's kind of in the Coup. You're given 2 cards. Those 2 cards tell you the actions you do on your turn. You get a card that tells you every action in the game that you can do. So people who are more left side brain logical thinking, they know exactly all the actions. They can read through that list. That helps them and know what they can do. The conceptual difficult part of Coup is the 2 cards that are face down in front of you that tell you what actions you legally do are not the only actions you can do. You could pretend you're somebody else in this game and you could do their action. And conceptually, that's sometimes difficult for people to understand that those 2 cards in front of them aren't the only thing they can do. They can lie. And when you lie, you can go ahead and get away with doing an action that you're not legally supposed to do and hope you don't get caught. So that's conceptually, you can build a whole plan around, an idea in your head, regardless of what the actual rules say are laid out. So logically speaking, somebody left side, they'll understand the game completely, but they might have a little difficulty, you know, executing their strategy because they're going to think more so, here's all the actions game, here's the two in front of me, and they might or towards those actions that are in front of them because conceptually they're not going to think, oh, I'm going to play around with these other actions, I'm going to use them, and never use the two actions in front of me until people start getting suspicious of me. Then you switch to those two actions that you're legally allowed to use, because then they're going to call you out by that time, but you'll be using actions that you're allowed to use. So getting to the point where you're conceptually thinking about, I'm not going to use two actions I'm allowed to use, can be difficult for some, but everything's laid out. So it's not as a werewolf where you're just given one card that says, here, you're a villager, good luck, bye. It lays out all the actions you can do on your turn. They're loosely laid out, but they are there. That's why I consider like Coup. It was actually a game that I generally, if I have enough people, will put out for people because it is pretty easy. Obviously, we cannot talk about difference between rules difficult, conceptual difficult, without talking about Dungeons and Dragons. So Dungeons and Dragons, in my opinion, is at the top of both. And I'll tell you why. So it's both a conceptually difficult game and a rule difficult. I don't have a lot of experience about Dungeons and Dragons. I guarantee you, more than likely, you've heard of it. I mean, you got Stranger Things on Netflix that went into, you know, a whole lot of it with the first season, stuff like that. You've heard of it. It is rules heavy. This is the book that players need. See, I have pages in here. I have character sheets. I have bookmarks. I have printed, like, change the rules after. You have page after different, just for the player to know. The whole book is stuff that the player, generally speaking, should know. Do they need to have this book memorized? No. But they should have a general idea of stuff in this book, the different races, classes, the concept of armor, concept of skill checks, things like that, especially because you're going to be playing with other players. Other players are not going to be the same race and class as you. Have a basic understanding playing with. This book is players. Separate book right here, Dungeon Master. Dungeon Master needs just more rules, things on how to run the game. Like, this is how to make NPCs, how to spawn monsters, different monsters, different to for wizards and masters to go into, throw your players into for fun. There's skill check rules, like what's a good check, how difficult should you make a combat encounter for, like, it goes in all that stuff right there. Generally, if you're going to be a DM, you're going to want monster book. This is a book full of monsters. Scenario books, if you're not comfortable making your own world up as a DM, you can scenario book of characters, location, plot points, like that. You're talking book after book after book full of rules, but all of those rules are just baseline rules. Like, you have a character who is a monk, and that character wants to jump over it. You as a character have to conceptualize what this pit looks like. How are you going to jump over it? what are you going to do? DM is just going to put you into a situation. They're going to paint you a picture. And that's where it completely shifts from rules difficult to concept. Because you are now playing monk. You have to think like your character. You have to put yourself in that situation as your character. Like, what would my character do here? Because you could do almost anything. DM will come up with a skill check for almost anything you want. So if you're surrounded by a bunch of people and you say, hey, I want to just pick up this cup of coffee and throw it at somebody's face, the DM will generally do that. He'll do a skill check for it. He'll figure out what happens. It's not in any of those rule books. There's no rule book that says, what do you do if you got players in an inn and they pick up a cup of coffee and they throw it at somebody? That's not directly in the rules, but you can do it. So Dungeons and Dragons books of rules, but a lot of that you could just at the same time in the middle of a fight toss that out the window, because the player they can exceptionally think of something like, I want to do this, and then the dungeon master, generally speaking, is figure out a way for that character to do that. So when and I haven't played Dungeons and Dragons myself in a while, before COVID. It's something I want to get into, not necessarily Dungeons and Dragons, but running a tabletop game. I have different ones, but you're looking at people, your friends, or people you're thinking about starting Dungeons and Dragons with people. You have to take into consideration the level of difficulty that it is, both sides. There's rules that they're going to have to read. There's things that they're going to have to know just to make their character. You know what I mean? You're talking like, generally speaking, a Dungeons and Dragons session is like 2 to 4 hours. Generally speaking, the first Dungeons and Dragons sessions you'll do with a new group, 4 hours, say, is just making your character. You're going to leave that session of 4 hours, not actually have played any of the campaign or anything like that, generally, because you're just going to make your character. You're going to figure out your character's name, your character's race, what class you want. You're going to roll your stats. You're going to do this. You got to talk about backgrounds. You got to talk about all these different things. And then depending on the tabletop game, sometimes you have to create story threads of connections between your characters. Hang out. You're going to do a little talking with people you're playing with. Figure out how your two characters know each other. How did everybody end up here? Things like that. So you're going to already be talking story, stuff like that. But you have to conceptualize this whole person, character. Why are they doing things that they're doing? And you're reading a whole list of rules. But like, you can't just say my character is the best swords fighter in the land. You have to need rules to back that up. Yeah, so that's where I put Dungeons and Dragons. It is at the top, both. Rules difficult, conceptual difficult. And that's the biggest thing right there. So those are my examples. What I think about when it comes to rules difficult games and conceptually games. So that's the thing. You have board life and play board games with people. Definitely recommend kind of approach these board games. You'll have much more luck. Think about board games in a manner like this than and to get more play board. With this way of thinking and with where I rate my own board games here, I have some go-to basic board games that I know. Like I know this person well enough. I know very good at maybe they're a graphic designer. Maybe they write stories. I know that conceptually they can think of stuff like very easily. So I have board games that I'm going to gravitate towards for that person to help get them into it. Then you want to think about the actual difficulty of the game in that spectrum. Just to get into it. If they're not big on board games, then you can't throw, just because somebody is very good at writing books or a graphic designer, you can't throw them straight dragons. Gonna overwhelm. Gonna be so much for them. So you want to find something like Dungeons and Dragons that's a little bit easier. Get them thinking that way. So like for me, I have 200. I have a lot of choices, and I have a whole spectrum. Like, so even in as far as like conceptual difficult, I have ones that are way down below easy, and I have one all the way at the top, like Dungeons and Dragons or that one's more of a conceptual code names. Code names is conceptually a game, but it's say trying to link words. So it's more about the connection between you and your other teammate, how well you can relate to their train of thought. And I have side is a co-op game, but it's not super hard. Co-op zombie game. All the rules are laid out for you. How you do, this is your turn, this is on your turn. But it's not too difficult. Yeah, so like I bring games out to show people, and I ease them into games. Have a lot more success, and you'll get more people playing games with you if you know about it that way. Throwing your favorite game at them because and you're good at it and you know how to play. I've gotten a lot of people that generally have no experience playing board games, hooked basically on board games because I took the time to we were hanging out, talked to them a little bit, and then they're like gonna have like a house party or whatever, and then you for like an easy board game to introduce you. Then from there you've built up on that. My wife and I have a couple friends that are a lot more into board games because of us. We showed them like how they can be, not just them in the deep end. And some of my wife's family have gotten to play board games that you wouldn't expect them to play because slowly idea. So that's what I recommend. I think the person you're trying to get that board have a lot more luck do that. You'll grow, play board games with. So it's like put the time in and you'll have a lot more success as far as it goes, like people to play board games with. I did, and for me, like I said, in this morning show, my first morning show is all about rules difficulty, conceptual difficulty. That is where I put the baseline when I think about all of my games. I go from there. Do you have any more questions about that or comments, or if you want to discuss any board games or ask me about any board games, if I've played it, if I own anything like that, feel free. This video will be put on my YouTube channel. You can find me on YouTube at Grim Method, just like all of my socials. lost it. That's something. There we go. I have found it again. So yeah, like this thing says, like it says right there. Follow me on. I'm at Grim. At basically everything, and be on YouTube 24 hours now. I have to wait. Which, so feel free to comment on that my YouTube video. I mean, Agro Method. Give me any ideas if you want to know about board questions you have about. I would love to hear it, or my opinion on a board. If I played it, or if I've heard of it, I'll let you know, or I'll look into it. Maybe I'll find the board games I don't know about that you can that I'll learn from you. So on YouTube, feel free to comment on it. Give me some feedback what you want to hear. If you want to hear more of the stuff on the morning show, if you want to hear different stuff or any other stuff that I talked about, things that I would like to talk about, let me know. Let me know on social media. You can go to my Discord, hang out with me, give me some ideas, and well, my Discord link is down there. It works now, thanks to Raging Rachel for letting me know. And yeah, so this was my first episode of my morning show. A lot of fun. I wanted to talk about board games so long because I had it in my head, and glad I got to talk about it. Now I got to think about what I want to do for my next morning show. Hopefully you guys will hang out that as well. Hopefully you'll check out my YouTube video once it's posted, and you'll join, and that'll convince you to join me on my next morning show. Either way, I enjoy doing them. I'm going to keep making them. I love to talk about board games, and so hopefully, if you are watching this on Tuesday morning, hopefully you had a good Monday. Hopefully your week it gets better and get to thinking about stuff. If you're watching this right now, thank you so much for joining with me. Tomorrow, if you want, playing, most likely we'll be playing Outriders. I think I'm going to play Outriders both days this week. I want to play some more Outriders. I'm going to give Octopath a little bit of a break. Not positive yet, though. Both of that could change, but for the time being, I will be here at 11 a.m. tomorrow playing Outriders, setting on fire with my pyromancer and maybe some friends. We will see. Catch you then. If not, see you next Monday, 10 a.m. Hopefully at 10 a.m. exactly this next Monday, at 10:20. See you then for the next morning show. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. Hopefully have a great week.